tonight I want to talk to you about two mechs that are quickly becoming stablemates and core components to many of my lists over the last, say, six to 8 months. These mechs, I believe, are very point efficient. They are very well rounded and can form the core of many, many lists. They're also fairly ubiquitous, meaning that they're available to a lot of different inner sphere factions, and they even have some limited use within the periphery, and they have some use within the clans as well. So the first up is going to be the Ostsol 4D, and then the other one is the Ostroc 2C. Now, what I like about both these mechs is that they are sub 35 points, the Ostsol being 33, the Ostroc being 34. They have a TMM of 2 and a speed of 10, meaning they have sufficient movement to get into the midboard and start engaging your opponent over those central objectives and those rear objectives, while the rest of your list either provides fire support or skirts around the outside to go for rear objectives or to get into the rear or flank of your opponent. That TMM2, it gets the defense up, and it allows for its total HP, its armor and structure, which is 5 armor, 5 structure for both of these units. It allows it to wither some shots by avoiding them. And that movement of 10 allows you to run 15. So in a pinch, you can get across the board or get across the battlefield and get into a position that you might not otherwise be able to with other heavy mechs that only move 8. It has good firepower, 3 short, 3 medium. I really like that 3 at medium for a heavy mech in that sub 35 category. It's very efficient. It is dishing out a pile of dice, and can usually connect with at least 2 of those shots each turn. The major differences between the two, of course, the Ostroc is 34 points versus the Ostsol of 33. The Ostsol 4D has energy weapons and a rear shot of 1-1 dash, while the Ostroc has an OV of 1. If you only have to choose one of these mechs and both of them are available to you, I think you go with the Ostsol 4D because you get that crit resistance with that energy weapon. You also get a little bit of rear shot for what it's worth, whereas the Ostroc, you're really only picking up the OV1, which may or may not be used over the course of a battle. Now, when I'm building lists and I'm looking for units, I like to have a certain amount of mobility in the list. And what I find is that when you start taking some of those heavy mechs that are movement 8, they just don't move nearly as fast as mechs that are movement 10 or movement 12. When you start getting into movement 12, what I find is that those mechs oftentimes aren't dishing enough shots or don't have enough health. So this is kind of a nice kind of middle point. And there are many missions where the skills and stats of these mechs can come into play, whether that's having extra health, whether that's dishing out more damage, whether that's having the size to hold objectives. They're imposing mechs. They're mechs that stick around for a little bit, but there also are mechs that have the damage output to be able to affect the battlefield effectively. Whereas some of the mechs that are in this price range, a lot of them are medium. They have less health. They're exchanging that health for maybe a little bit extra movement, but they also have less damage. Oftentimes they're only doing, if they're going to have this kind of movement of 10 or 12, they're oftentimes only dishing out 2 shots at medium range. And so these mechs can stick around, they can stay around, they can also affect the battlefield. Oftentimes these mechs, when you're playing with them, last the entire match, the entire game, because they're also not particularly they don't draw attention to themselves, especially if you're running 2 of these plus another mech that's in this kind of heavy mech category that is 3 at medium. They're very samey, and so your opponent doesn't really think of them as a major threat like they would something that's dishing out 5 damage or 6 damage, or something that has a lot of health, say 12, 13, 14 points of health, or something that is particularly fast moving, 14, 16, 18, 20. So they have a tendency to stick around and not draw a lot of attention to themselves. I find my opponents are constantly splitting fire instead of focusing fire on these mechs. And so these mechs are really good, and they're also very widely available. Now, when you're looking at the Ostroc, I'll highlight the 4C. variant as well. It's 1 point cheaper at 33. It loses the OV1, gains 0 star at long range, but then picks up energy. Now, the downside to the 4C is it's really only available for Periphery and Pirate factions. So if you're running Periphery or Pirates, you can pick up an Ostroc 2C, a 4C, and an Ostsol 4D, and you can have a really tight core for just over 100 points. You can pick up 30 HP, you're picking up 9 points of damage, and you're picking up solid movement, and they can form a really good core to that list. If you're looking at other variants of the Ostroc, there's a couple that I'll highlight that I think some of them are good, some of them are not good. You may want to consider. The first is the 2CB. The downside to this mech is that it's basically a clan mech. There is some periphery use in some later eras, but really it's a clan mech. It's fairly available for clans. It's 36 points. It's 332 with an OV of 1. The drawbacks to this one that I don't like is you're spending an extra 2 points to pick up 2 at long and 1 OV. And you're really not going to use those, so it's kind of a waste of 2 points if you were to ask me. When you're building those 350 and those 250 lists, being efficient and trimming points where you can is really important. And so by wasting 2 points on that too long, when this thing is going to be in the mid board and by the end of turn 2 and for sure by turn 3 is going to be engaging targets at medium range, it's kind of a waste of points, but it is there for clanners to consider. The 5C is a decent mech. It's 37 points. It also is 332, so you're wasting a little points on that long, but it's movement 12 and it gains a jump 10, which is actually pretty nice. It also picks up energy weapons, and then it front loads armor. So it's 6 armor, 3 structure. You are losing 1 point of health, but you're front loading that armor, so it's very crit resistant. The drawbacks to this one is that it is only available for, I believe, the Franc Reaches and the Taurians. But for 37 points, you get a decent mech that has a movement 12 and a jump of 10. The 2D, this one is probably the most tempting of the Ostrocs outside of the 2C. It's a 39 points. It's same movement, same TMM, same armor structure, but it loses that OV1 and picks up 442 for its damage profile. 39 points is pretty good to have a damage of 4 at medium. Again, I think you're wasting points on the long range damage, but for 4 points for sub 40, it's a pretty good option if you have that available to you. But it's not going to be quite as point efficient as the Ostroc 2C, which is only 34 points. The 9C is 29 points. I just don't think you'd want to run this, and the reason is that you are only speed 8 with a jump of 6, and you lose a TMM, and you go down to 1. Otherwise, it's got the same damage profile and same HP at 5/5 armor structure and 3/3 short medium damage. Losing that TMM, to me, just isn't worth it. It's going to take hits. It's going to die that much faster. The 2L is only 2/2, 0 star with an OV of 1, and the 3C is also 2/2. It's a 0 instead of a 0 star with an OV of 1, but it picks up energy weapons. I don't think these are worth it because you're having to spend a heat to get to that 3rd damage. Now, when it comes to the Ostsol, the 4F is the one that's closest in kind of points and performance to the 4D. It's 2/2/2 though with energy weapons. I don't think it's worth it. Again, you're saving 2 points to pick up 2 long range damage. So you're moving your short and medium into long to save 2 points. Again, it's going to be in that medium range band pretty quickly in a Wolfnet format. Even in other formats, it's going to close pretty quickly. Long range shots just don't connect enough, especially if you're only throwing 2 of them. So you're really saving 2 points to become a weaker version of the 4D. The 8D and the 8E, I really like these ones for 36 points. They're 3 more points than the 4D. They're 331 each. Well, 331 for the 8D, 330 for the 8E. The 8E picks up an OV of 1. What I like about these is that they transfer 2 points of structure into the armor, so they're 7/3, so they are more crit resistant. The 8D has case. The 8E has energy weapons and a rear shot of 110. So they're for 3 points, you're gaining a little bit of crit resistance, a little bit of durability over the course of the battle because you are front loaded in armor. The only drawback to these ones, other than spending some more points, you could be a little more efficient by taking the Ostsol 4D, is that they're more or less only available for Fed Sons with some limited availability in later eras on that 80 for some other factions. Model-wise, there are two metal models of the Ostsol, which I really like. Actually, I think they're for Ironman metal sculpts are pretty good. I own several of them, especially since if I had to choose between the two, I'm going to take the Ostsol because you get that energy weapon and you're spending one less point. The Ostroc in Ironman Metals is kind of a gremlin. It looks kind of bad. It's not terrible for putting together. It doesn't look awful on the battlefield, but it kind of looks like a gremlin's trying to give you a hug. And I don't particularly care for it. What's really nice, though, is that in the new Mercenaries Kickstarter, we've got plastic versions of both of these. Now, drawback for the Ostsol is that it's going to be in that Mercenary starter box. So you're going to have to spend more money to get that mech. But that starter box has some other really good mechs in there. So it's probably not terrible over the the grander scheme or the grander picture of buying mechs and purchasing new units. So you're going to be picking up things like the Flea and Maxims and things like that are in that box set, which are also very good units. And then the plastic Ostroc is in one of the other Lance packs. They're beautiful models. I've seen them up close. I really like them, and I think they're really good options. So, again, these two mechs are kind of a tag team, the yin and yang of many of my lists these days, just because for sub 35 points, you're getting very good heavy mechs that have a good TMM, good damage output, good armor and structure, and they have good size so they can control objectives and kind of push things around. So if you haven't been playing with them, I would consider them, especially since you can get them in plastic now. Again, if you can only choose one, I'd go with the Ostsol over the Ostroc. But these are really good mechs that have a very important role, I think, in many lists, or can have a very important role in many lists as being kind of your mid-board skirmishers that kind of pin the enemy down so that your long-range snipers and your sprinters or your runners can get around the flanks and around the sides. And because they're throwing 3 damage, they actually are fairly threatening. And because they have that high movement, they actually can get on objectives. They can take advantage of terrain more easily, and they're a little more durable because they're 10 armor, 10 structure, and a TMM too.